Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to cut through all the noise and really find out what's the real cost of going solar in India.
So, you've been thinking about going solar, right? Well, if you have, you are definitely not alone. It's a huge question on the minds of so many homeowners across India. Is now the time to finally make that switch? I mean, the promise is it's so appealing, isn't it? The idea that you can slash your electricity bill, use clean energy and get a little bit of energy independence, it really does sound like a total win-win. Okay, but let's get real. What's the actual story on the cost and the hassle? Well, to figure that out, we're diving deep into a recent study that actually asked homeowners these exact questions. We're going to get to the truth.
All right, first things first. Let's start with the big one. The main reason anyone even thinks about solar to begin with. That monthly electricity bill that just seems to keep going up and up.
And wow, the scale of this problem is actually huge. Just look at these numbers. The study found that for more than 71% of homeowners, that bill is over 3,000 rupees every single month. That is a major ongoing expense. You can see why the search for an alternative feels so urgent for so many people.
Okay, so that search for an alternative, it naturally leads us right to the biggest roadblock in most people's minds, that big, scary, upfront cost.
Yeah, this one idea right here. Solar is just too expensive. It turns out, this is the single most common myth out there. And for a lot of folks, it's a belief that just stops the conversation cold, right before it even gets a chance to start.
But let's look at the actual reality, because it's pretty different. So for a typical 3-kilowatt system, the initial cost looks like it's around 2.1 lakh rupees. But, and this is the absolute game changer, government subsidies like the PM Surya Ghar scheme can knock a whopping 78,000 rupees right off that price. That brings the final price down to 1.32 lakh. Suddenly, that's a much more doable number, right?
Okay, so with that new lower price in mind, the big question becomes, how fast does this thing actually pay for itself? When do you start seeing a return?
Well, the analysis is pretty clear. A standard 3-kilowatt system can generate enough power to save you more than 3,000 rupees on your bill. And that's not a one-time thing. That's every single month. We're talking about a direct, real return on your investment, literally from day one.
And here's the kicker. When you do the math, that payback period is surprisingly fast. The huge majority of people who already have solar expect to get their entire investment back in just 3 to 5 years. And after that, it's all pure savings, straight into your pocket.
And this chart really shows you what that looks like in the real world. Look, it might not just wipe out your bill completely overnight, but a full 75% of users saw a real, noticeable drop in their monthly bills right away. That's a tangible benefit you can actually see in your bank account almost immediately.
All right, so the money part seems to make sense. But what about the other big worry? Let's tackle that second major concern, the so-called maintenance headache.
Yep, this was the number 2 myth holding people back. There's this genuine fear that you're going to get stuck with these constant, expensive repairs, just to keep the lights on. It's a big worry.
But again, the data from people who actually own these systems tells a totally different story. For most of them, the annual maintenance cost is pretty predictable, usually somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 rupees. Now think about it. When you're saving thousands a month on your bill, that number becomes a totally manageable cost.
Okay, so if the cost works out and the maintenance isn't the headache we thought it was, what's the final verdict here?
This is where it gets really interesting. The study found that the biggest hurdles aren't really technical anymore. It's not even purely about the money. It's about these information gaps. People just aren't sure about the actual savings, and that stubborn perception of a high initial cost just won't go away, even with all the subsidies out there.
And this quote from the study really just nails it. It says, "While awareness levels are relatively high, misconceptions about high costs and maintenance persist, hindering wider adoption." I mean, that says it all, right? People have heard about solar, but these old myths are still the biggest roadblocks. It's a classic case of perception versus reality.
And yet, despite all of that, despite the myths and the hurdles, the study found one number that is just, honestly, it's staggering. When you ask people directly, a full 96.22% of them believe that solar power is a good fit for their homes. That is an almost unanimous belief in the tech itself. So look, the data is pretty clear. The tech is ready, the numbers actually make sense, and pretty much everyone wants it. So what's the real barrier now? Maybe it's not about the technology or the cost anymore. Maybe it's just about taking that first step to get the real facts. Thanks for watching The Explainer.